So, if you woke up and felt that familiar wave of cold panic wash over you, that feeling that the digital world was collapsing again, that your tools had just vanished, you were right.
You weren't alone.
It was another one of those once-in-a-lifetime internet disasters, and, well, frankly, they seem to be happening about 3 times a year now.
It really was a collective digital freeze. I mean, millions of websites just went dark. AI platforms stopped responding. The whole system for routing traffic was just severely compromised.
But the thing that sets this outage apart is who was sitting in the hot seat.
Cloudflare.
Exactly. When we talk about global internet infrastructure, we always hear about AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud.
The usual suspects.
Right. But this time, the failure was rooted in a company that's usually the silent backbone, kind of the unsung hero of the whole thing.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the truly bizarre, almost farcical technical anatomy of this failure.
Yeah, we want to know why one internal hiccup at Cloudflare managed to trigger such an enormous global collapse.
The first step is truly grasping Cloudflare's centrality. I think a lot of people use the internet every day and they just don't realize they are running almost entirely through Cloudflare's services.
They're a giant.
A giant. They handle your DNS resolution, which is basically the internet's phone book, translating names into addresses.
Right.
They provide essential DDoS protection, which is this massive automated shield against attacks. And crucially, they manage bot mitigation for nearly every major site out there.
So Cloudflare isn't just a lane on the digital highway. They're the traffic cop, the toll booth, and the armored barrier, all rolled into one.
A perfect way to put it. And when a provider with that much centralized control stumbles,
The consequences are immediate and huge.
and catch a terrible fall it did. The immediate impact was brutal, especially since all these services are so interwoven. We saw major AI chat platforms just become unusable.
Social media sites, too. The very places you'd go to find out what's going on.
We're choking on error messages. The source of truth was failing, too.
That's one of the details from our sources that I find particularly jarring. Cloudflare's own status page. The single place where engineers and the public go for reliable information.
Yeah.
It barely stayed online.
It was an incredible site. It struggled to serve anything but the most basic HTML. It looked like a page that had been pulled out of an archive from, 1998?
Just stripped down.
Completely. Just serving the bare minimum status update, which was effectively, yes, everything is on fire. That failure of the emergency system itself just underscores the scale of the crisis.
But to bring it back to a human moment, a way we can all really grasp the severity of it, we can look at the professional gaming world.
The ultimate canary in the digital coal mine.
Exactly. Professional gamers, people who rely on sub-millisecond latency for their income, suddenly found they couldn't connect.
Locked out.
Completely locked out. Our sources note this created that rare moment in history when professional players were forced to touch grass.
Right. When the people who spend 16 hours a day online are forced outside, you've hit maximum global disruption.
It's a vivid demonstration that this wasn't some, marginal back-end issue.
No, this was a system-wide collapse affecting revenue, critical communication, and, global relaxation all at once. It connects the very technical failure directly to the user.
So with that chaos established, let's pivot to the timeline and the confusion. The crisis began around 6 a.m. Eastern Time, and in those first hours, Cloudflare's language was cautious.
Vague. They described it as internal service degradation.
Which is where we need to put on our corporate translator hats for you.
Right. When a massive infrastructure provider says internal service degradation, they're communicating two things. One, we're having a catastrophic event.
And two,
we haven't found the root cause yet, so we're telling you as little as possible.
That vagueness, of course, fuels immediate speculation. We all did it. You see platforms like these fail, you assume the worst.
Was it a massive cyber attack? A state-sponsored thing?
Or a sophisticated zero-day exploit? Or even just a common DNS misconfiguration that just snowballed out of control.
The assumption of malicious intent is natural because the impact felt so disproportionately large for an internal slip-up.
But this is where the story takes a critical turn. According to Cloudflare's CTO, they were able to dismiss those external theories pretty quickly. The official answer was none of the above.
Which means we have to dive into the core technical vulnerability. And what we find is both more mundane and, I think, far more instructive about the risks of all this centralization.
So let's drill down. What was the true root cause beyond the corporate buzzwords?
The primary diagnosis was a latent bug. It was residing in a specific component of their network.
Okay.
And crucially, this component was the service responsible for bot mitigation, the very system whose job it is to filter out malicious bots and protect the network.
So a flaw was just sitting there, dormant, waiting for the right conditions to strike. What flipped the switch?
A completely routine, seemingly innocuous configuration update. This update gets pushed out, and in doing so, it activates that latent bug.
And that triggers cascading failures across their entire infrastructure.
Exactly. It wasn't the update's purpose that was flawed, it was simply the trigger hitting a hidden weakness.
But the deeper dive has to focus on why that configuration update was so toxic. We know this file was automatically generated to manage threat traffic. But where did the actual failure occur?
This is the real punchline, and it involves something we all deal with: digital bloat. The file in question, the config file, had simply grown far beyond its expected size.
Bloat. Are we talking about the internet breaking because the file got fat?
Exactly. It sounds almost silly, doesn't it? This wasn't a malicious injection, it was an internal system that had run amok. The file became enormous because of the constant automated generation of new rules.
And in its enormous size, it hit critical resource limits.
Yes.
Let's slow down on that, because for our listeners who get networking, this is the key detail. What does overwhelmed mean here? Did it cause a memory failure?
It's likely a combination, but the most catastrophic outcome points directly to memory exhaustion or maybe parsing timeouts. When the software tried to ingest this gigantic config file, it probably hit an allocated memory limit and just crashed the process.
An out-of-memory error.
Or it took so long to parse the file that it hit a timeout limit, causing other services to fail because they couldn't load their instructions in time. The software basically choked on its own massive instruction manual.
This is where the irony becomes systemic, isn't it? The mechanism designed to manage external threat traffic couldn't handle the internal volume of its own data.
Right.
I have to ask, if this file is automatically generated, doesn't that point to a massive flaw in their internal QA? Shouldn't there be guardrails to stop a file from ballooning like that?
Well, that raises a critical question about complexity and our trust in automation. Yes, ideally there should be strict size limits, but when you're dealing with a threat landscape that is constantly changing, system designers often prioritize adaptability, adding more and more rules over strict constraints.
Assuming the system can scale forever.
And this incident proves that even the most rigorous automated systems can have an Achilles heel defined purely by size.
The summary quote we pulled from the source material is the perfect encapsulation of this. It's a phrase worth remembering. The file meant to protect the internet became so bloated that it broke the internet.
It perfectly captures the fragility of it all. It challenges that assumption that adding more protection layers automatically increases resilience. In this case, complexity and size introduce the single largest point of failure.
Which brings us to our final segment. Connecting this technical failure back to the broader systemic vulnerability of the modern internet. This incident just undermines that popular narrative that the internet is this decentralized, resilient utopia.
The structural reality is so different. The internet is actually a deeply fragile ecosystem held together by only a few highly concentrated infrastructure giants. Cloudflare is one of those pillars.
If they fail, there's no immediate, seamless rerouting alternative for millions of sites.
Not for those core services, no.
We've seen other centralized failures before, BGP routing issues, DNS outages, but the mechanism here, the automated self-sabotage, is maybe the most concerning.
It wasn't a firewall breach or a cut cable. It was software quality assurance failing on a global scale. And because Cloudflare handles such a significant percentage of traffic, that small internal failure, a bloated file, had planetary consequences.
The implication for you, the person who depends on these systems every day, is pretty profound. We tend to worry about the external threats, the hackers, the nation states, but this reminds us that the greatest vulnerability can be internal complexity and the sheer unchecked growth of automated systems.
It means we are utterly dependent on the internal health and the QA processes of just a handful of companies. And as systems get more complex, the chance for these unanticipated consequences, where a system designed to protect accidentally consumes itself, it just grows exponentially.
So we learned that global digital access can be curtailed not by a massive cyber war, but by a configuration file that just got too big for its britches. The protector became the weapon against itself.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to explore. If automated systems designed specifically for global protection can accidentally grow so complex and large that they become the single biggest point of failure, what does this imply about our reliance on automation in other critical global systems?
Think about the software that guides high-speed rail, manages national energy grids, or processes global financial transactions. If the file meant to save the internet can break it, what other automated systems are currently growing quietly toward a point of critical self-destruction? We'll leave you with that one to chew on.